The impact of Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ on Christianity, a critical analysis. Released in 2004, The Passion of the Christ, directed by Mel Gibson, is one of the most significant and controversial films in modern cinematic history, particularly within Christian communities. The film, which chronicles the final hours of Jesus Christ's life, his suffering, crucifixion, and death, had a profound impact on the global Christian audience and beyond, igniting conversations about faith, historical accuracy, and the portrayal of religious figures in popular culture. With a focus on the graphic and harrowing depiction of Christ's passion, Gibson's film became a powerful point of reflection, offering a deep emotional connection to the sufferings of Christ, but also generating significant debate regarding its accuracy and theological implications. The impact on Christianity. The release of The Passion of the Christ had a remarkable impact on Christian communities worldwide. The film drew large numbers of Christian viewers to theaters, as it was seen as an opportunity to witness the culmination of Christ's sacrifice in a raw and visceral way. For many, the film was a deeply moving experience that brought the Passion of Christ to life in a way that had never been seen before. The film's graphic violence and portrayal of Christ's suffering led many to reflect on the enormity of Christ's sacrifice, often prompting discussions about the significance of the crucifixion in Christian theology. Spiritual awakening and revitalization of faith. For some Christians, the film sparked a spiritual awakening. The raw depiction of Christ's suffering made the crucifixion more tangible, and viewers were moved to a deeper appreciation of Christ's love and sacrifice. It reminded many believers of the centrality of the cross in Christian faith, where Christ's death was not just a historical event, but a pivotal moment in God's redemptive plan for humanity. For others, the Passion reignited their passion for evangelism, as it served as a tool to reach out to others and start discussions about faith and salvation. The film became an evangelical tool for many churches, as it provided a visual representation of the central message of Christianity, Christ's sacrificial death for the forgiveness of sins. Numerous Christian leaders and pastors saw the film as an opportunity to inspire deeper reflection on Christ's suffering, leading to increased attendance at church services and Bible studies focused on the Passion narrative. It also led to a greater emphasis on Lent, Good Friday services, and other traditions that commemorate Christ's death. Emotional and psychological impact. For many viewers, the movie had a profound emotional impact. The graphic and unrelenting depiction of Christ's physical suffering created a visceral experience that resonated with many. Some individuals were brought to tears by the portrayal of Christ's sacrifice and the extent of the pain he endured. The brutal nature of the film, depicting Christ being flogged, beaten, and ultimately crucified in a manner that is incredibly graphic, left viewers grappling with the enormity of Christ's sacrifice and the depths of his love for humanity. However, the film's violence and emphasis on suffering also left some viewers feeling disturbed or overwhelmed. While some saw it as a necessary depiction of the reality of Jesus' passion, others felt that the film was too graphic and sensationalized. Critics pointed out that the portrayal of violence in the film could overshadow the broader theological message of the resurrection and the hope that Christians have in Christ's victory over death. The emotional intensity of the film contributed to its success, but it also sparked debate within Christian communities. Some felt that the graphic nature of the violence was essential to conveying the brutality of Christ's suffering, while others worried that it could desensitize viewers to the message of salvation and overshadow the message of forgiveness, redemption, and love that is central to the Christian faith. Theological accuracy. What was real and what was fiction? While The Passion of the Christ made a powerful emotional impact, it is important to examine the historical and theological accuracy of the film. Gibson and his team went to great lengths to ensure the film was as faithful as possible to the gospel accounts, but certain elements of the film have been contested, both by theologians and historians. Real aspects. The crucifixion, the central event of Christ's crucifixion, which is depicted with shocking detail, is one of the most accurate parts of the film. The gospel accounts of Christ's arrest, trial, and crucifixion are generally adhered to in the narrative. The portrayal of Christ carrying his cross and being nailed to the cross reflects the accounts found in the New Testament, such as in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The physical pain and agony that Jesus endured during the crucifixion are faithful to the Roman practices of execution, which were designed to be brutal and public. The characters. The film largely stays true to the biblical characters, including the portrayal of Jesus, Mary, the disciples, and other key figures in the Passion narrative. The depiction of Mary, for instance, was in line with Catholic and Orthodox views of the Virgin Mary, with a focus on her suffering as the mother of Christ. The interactions between Jesus and his disciples, as well as the trial before Pontius Pilate, follow the Gospel accounts, although some artistic liberties were taken. The scourging, the depiction of Jesus being scourged, whipped, before his crucifixion was informed by historical knowledge of Roman practices, where criminals were often severely flogged before being crucified. This detail is often cited as an important and accurate element of the film, showcasing the immense physical suffering Christ endured. Fictional aspects. The character of Satan. One of the most criticized elements of the Passion of the Christ is the portrayal of Satan, depicted as a shadowy, androgynous figure who manipulates events behind the scenes. The character of Satan is not based on any direct scriptural evidence and is an invention of Gibson and the filmmakers. While Satan's influence in the Passion narrative is implied through the events leading to Jesus' death, the film takes artistic liberties in portraying the figure as an active, visible antagonist, which has been controversial for some viewers and theologians. The mystical scenes. The film includes several imaginative elements that are not found in the Gospels, including a sequence in which Jesus' mother, Mary, experiences flashbacks to his childhood, and symbolic moments where Jesus is shown having an almost supernatural connection with the events unfolding. These scenes, while emotionally powerful, have no basis in the biblical texts and are viewed by some as deviations from the Gospel accounts. The role of the Jewish authorities. The film has also faced criticism for its portrayal of the Jewish authorities. Theological and social impact. The Passion of the Christ sparked a wide range of reactions within the Christian community. For some, the film reinforced the core tenets of their faith, deepening their understanding of the crucifixion and its centrality to the Christian gospel. For others, the film raised concerns about its theological implications, the emotional weight of its violence, and the way it might shape public perceptions of the Christian message. Evangelism and outreach. The film became an evangelical tool in the hands of many Christian communities. Churches used the movie as a means of outreach, hoping to engage non-believers and rekindle interest in the gospel message. The vivid portrayal of Christ's suffering made the message of salvation more accessible and powerful, especially for those who were previously distant from the faith. Debate on artistic representation of faith. On a broader level, the Passion reignited discussions about the representation of religious figures in popular media. The film's commercial success showed that there was a significant audience for faith-based films, paving the way for other religious films to be produced in the years that followed. However, the film also raised questions about the appropriate balance between artistic freedom and respect for theological accuracy. The Passion of the Christ remains one of the most influential films in recent history, particularly within Christian communities. It has prompted countless discussions about the nature of Christ's suffering, the role of the Passion in Christian faith, and the complexities of translating sacred texts into visual media. While the film has faced criticism for its historical inaccuracies and artistic liberties, it has also had a profound and lasting impact on the way many Christians view the crucifixion and its significance. Ultimately, Mel Gibson's film succeeded in its goal of emotionally connecting viewers to the central event of Christian faith, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Whether viewed as an accurate depiction or as a work of artistic interpretation, The Passion of the Christ continues to be a touchstone for discussions about the portrayal of faith in modern cinema and its ability to provoke deep spiritual reflection among believers. Released in 2004, Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ was not merely a cinematic portrayal of Jesus Christ's final hours, but a cultural and spiritual event that stirred deep reflections and responses within Christian communities worldwide. The film, which centers on the brutal and graphic depiction of Jesus' suffering, crucifixion, and death, catalyzed a spiritual awakening for many viewers and played a significant role in the revitalization of faith for a diverse audience. For Christians, the film revived the essence of Christ's ultimate sacrifice, reigniting a deep sense of reverence, contemplation, and commitment to the core tenets of the Christian faith. This review will delve into how the Passion of the Christ contributed to a spiritual awakening and revitalization of faith among believers, exploring the profound emotional and theological impact it had on the Christian community, and considering both the positive and controversial reactions the film generated in this regard. A powerful visual meditation on Christ's sacrifice. At the heart of the film's impact is its intense and graphic portrayal of Christ's passion, the suffering and death of Jesus, which is the foundational event of Christian theology. The physical violence and anguish depicted in the Passion are not mere sensationalism. They were carefully crafted to provide viewers with a visceral understanding of the immense cost of Jesus' sacrifice for the redemption of humanity. For many Christians, this stark portrayal of Christ's suffering moved them emotionally and spiritually, leading to a deeper connection to the central message of their faith, that Jesus willingly endured unimaginable suffering for the salvation of mankind. For those who had become complacent or distanced from the significance of Christ's death, the film offered a powerful visual catalyst that forced a re-engagement with the depths of the gospel story. The intense scenes of flogging, beating, and the crucifixion underscored the reality of Christ's pain and sacrifice in a way that had not been so raw or immediate in previous portrayals. The brutality of the scenes led many believers to reflect on the love of God manifested through Christ's suffering, a love so deep and sacrificial that it could not be comprehended fully in words but only through the experience of witnessing such cruelty and love intersect, awakening a deeper sense of reverence. One of the immediate effects of the Passion was the revival of a deep sense of reverence for the crucifixion. For centuries, Christians have commemorated Christ's death through rituals such as Good Friday services, Lent, and communion, but the film gave these observances a new dimension by bringing the gravity of the crucifixion into focus in a very personal, emotional, and unrelenting way. The graphic nature of the film encouraged many viewers to reconsider how they approached the death of Jesus, not as a distant historical event but as a present and profound reality that should deeply influence every aspect of a believer's life. In many Christian communities, the Passion revived the practice of deeply contemplating the meaning of Christ's suffering, particularly during Lent and the days leading up to Good Friday. It was as if the film made the Passion narrative not just something to be read in Scripture but something to be felt in the heart and mind. The heightened awareness of Christ's sacrifice inspired many to meditate more intentionally on the significance of his death, leading to a revitalization of the meaning of the cross in their personal walks with Christ. A call to recommit to Christ and his mission. Another aspect of the spiritual awakening facilitated by the Passion was its call to spiritual renewal and recommitment to following Christ's example. The film, with its portrayal of Christ's love and obedience to God the Father, underscored the depth of Jesus' dedication to God's redemptive plan. Christ's willingness to endure the cross became a powerful call for believers to live lives of greater devotion and self-sacrifice. The film served as a reminder that the Christian walk is one of following Christ's example, one that includes suffering, humility, and surrender to God's will. Many Christians felt a renewed sense of duty to live according to the teachings of Jesus, particularly in light of the radical nature of his sacrifice. In a world often filled with distractions, materialism, and self-centeredness, the Passion reminded viewers that following Christ involves carrying a cross of one's own, whether in enduring hardship, making sacrifices, or actively participating in God's mission in the world. The film also prompted some viewers to renew their commitment to evangelism and outreach. For those who were inspired by the intense personal and communal reflection the Passion encouraged, it became a tool for spreading the Christian message, a call to forgiveness and redemption. Beyond the intense focus on Christ's physical suffering, the film also highlighted the theological message of forgiveness and redemption that is at the heart of Christianity. Jesus' willingness to forgive those who crucified him, exemplified in the poignant moment in the film where he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23 verse 34, became a powerful lesson for Christians. This moment of divine mercy became central to the emotional and spiritual impact of the film, inviting viewers to reflect on the radical nature of forgiveness in the Christian faith. For some viewers, the Passion became an invitation to reconcile broken relationships, let go of bitterness, and forgive others as Christ forgave. The film's portrayal of Jesus' unwavering commitment to offer grace and forgiveness in the face of intense suffering spoke to the core of Christian beliefs about mercy and redemption. Many Christians felt a renewed calling to live lives that reflected Christ's love, forgiveness, and grace, extending that same mercy to others as a response to the immense forgiveness they had received from God. The film's message of redemption also encouraged many to reflect on their own need for salvation. Christ's sacrifice, though incredibly painful, was portrayed as a necessary act to provide redemption for all of humanity. This emphasized the truth that the cross was not just about Jesus' suffering, it was about restoring a broken relationship between God and humanity. For some viewers, this realization led to spiritual renewal and a fresh commitment to accepting and living out the full implications of Christ's work on the cross. Challenges and controversies. A divisive film. While The Passion of the Christ had a profound impact on spiritual awakening for many, it was also met with significant controversy and criticism. Some theologians and Christian leaders questioned the film's theological accuracy, particularly in its portrayal of certain biblical events and its emphasis on physical violence. Critics argued that the excessive brutality of the film could overshadow the more hopeful aspects of the gospel, such as the resurrection and the victory over sin and death. For some, the overemphasis on Jesus' suffering at times risked creating a lopsided view of Christianity, focusing too much on Christ's death without giving equal attention to his triumph over death. Additionally, the film faced backlash from Jewish groups who felt it unfairly depicted the Jewish people as responsible for Jesus' death. Though the Gospels make clear that Jesus' crucifixion involved both Roman and Jewish authorities, the film's focus on certain Jewish figures raised concerns about perpetuating harmful anti-Semitic sentiments. Mel Gibson's own controversial remarks also fueled this debate, casting a shadow over the film's spiritual message for some viewers. Despite these controversies, however, the film succeeded in initiating conversations about faith, forgiveness, suffering, and redemption, making it a pivotal moment for many Christians who were moved to examine their own spiritual lives more closely. The Passion of the Christ had an undeniable effect on the spiritual awakening and revitalization of faith for millions of Christians around the world. By bringing the graphic reality of Christ's suffering to the screen, the film brought viewers to a new level of emotional engagement with the central message of Christianity, the sacrificial love of God displayed through Christ's death on the cross. For many, it became an invitation to revisit the cross, to recommit to Christ, and to live lives of greater devotion, forgiveness, and service. While the film was not without its controversies and criticisms, its spiritual impact cannot be overstated. It brought the message of the gospel into a new light, making it not only a theological truth but a deeply personal and emotional experience. For countless viewers, The Passion of the Christ sparked a deeper appreciation of the magnitude of Christ's sacrifice, reignited faith, and prompted renewed commitments to follow Christ's example of love, sacrifice, and redemption. As a result, the film's legacy continues to resonate within the hearts of many believers, calling them to live with greater devotion, humility, and love. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, 2004, is a film that vividly portrays the final hours of Jesus Christ's life, focusing on his intense suffering, crucifixion, and death. Its graphic and visceral depiction of Christ's passion, while compelling, also sparked a range of emotional and psychological responses from Christian viewers worldwide. For many, the film was more than just an artistic rendering of biblical events. It became a transformative spiritual experience, one that connected deeply with the core of Christian belief, the suffering and sacrifice of Jesus Christ for the salvation of humanity. However, the emotional intensity of the film, which was noted for its unrelenting violence and raw depiction of physical and emotional pain, also led to psychological reactions that were complex and multifaceted. This review will explore the emotional and psychological impact that The Passion of the Christ had on Christian viewers, examining both the deep, spiritual transformation it prompted in many, as well as the emotional toll and psychological challenges it imposed on others. The power of empathy and emotional connection to Christ's suffering. One of the most significant emotional impacts of The Passion of the Christ was its ability to foster a deep empathy and emotional connection to Jesus Christ's suffering. For many Christians, seeing the brutal treatment of Jesus on screen, his flogging, the crowning with thorns, the forced journey to the cross, and the horrific crucifixion, was a deeply emotional experience that made his sacrifice feel real, immediate, and personal. The intense suffering portrayed in the film invited viewers to reflect on the significance of Christ's death in a more visceral, emotional way. Christians who had grown up hearing about Christ's suffering in church or reading about it in Scripture were now able to see and feel it in a way that they hadn't before. The film vividly conveyed the gravity of the sacrifice that Jesus made for the forgiveness of sins. For many, this created a sense of awe and reverence toward Christ's act of love and devotion for humanity. In this sense, the emotional power of the film was transformative. Viewers were invited to enter into the suffering of Christ, something that served to deepen their connection to him as a Savior who endured immense pain out of love. Furthermore, the film's portrayal of Mary, the mother of Jesus, added a deeply emotional layer for many viewers. The heart-wrenching moments between Mary and Jesus, particularly when she watches him fall while carrying the cross, resonated strongly with Christian audiences, especially those who understood Mary's unique role in salvation history. This maternal connection to Christ's suffering created a more personal emotional experience, as viewers empathized with both the son and the mother in their shared grief. Psychological responses: the impact of violence and trauma. However, while the film's emotional impact was profound for many, its unrelenting portrayal of physical violence and suffering also caused psychological distress for some viewers. The brutality of Christ's suffering was depicted in such graphic detail, long scenes of Jesus being whipped, beaten, and tortured, that many found it difficult to watch. For individuals who were already sensitive to violence or trauma, the intensity of the film could feel overwhelming, evoking feelings of distress, sorrow, and even physical discomfort. The psychological toll of witnessing such extreme violence played a prominent role in the debate about the film's ethical and theological implications. While the film intended to communicate the depth of Christ's sacrifice, some viewers found the level of graphic violence excessive. The frequent focus on Christ's blood and wounds, while historically accurate in terms of Roman crucifixion practices, became the subject of criticism for some who believed that the violence overshadowed the spiritual significance of Christ's death. Critics argued that the repeated violence might desensitize viewers to the true message of Christianity, the hope of resurrection and salvation through Christ's victory over death. For some, the graphic violence triggered intense psychological responses, including anxiety, post-traumatic stress, or flashbacks, particularly for individuals with previous experiences of trauma or abuse. The raw and uncompromising depiction of suffering forced many viewers to reckon with the reality of human violence, suffering, and injustice, which could be emotionally overwhelming. Spiritual reflection and psychological healing. A path to redemption. Despite the psychological impact of the film's violence, many viewers found that the Passion ultimately led to emotional and spiritual healing. The vivid depiction of Christ's suffering encouraged a deep reflection on the meaning of his sacrifice, how he endured such pain and humiliation for the forgiveness of sins, and how his death opened the way to spiritual redemption. The film's emotional power was, for many, a catalyst for spiritual transformation and renewal. For those in the Christian faith, the psychological process of facing the harshness of the Passion and the immense love that underpinned it prompted a reconsideration of the cost of salvation. The emotional and psychological weight of witnessing Christ's suffering helped believers better understand the depths of God's love, as they connected their personal suffering with that of Christ's. It became an invitation to emotionally engage with the central tenet of the Christian faith, the reconciliation of humanity to God through Christ's death. Many found that watching the film evoked a sense of personal introspection about their own relationship with Christ and how they were living out the teachings of the gospel. The emotional catharsis experienced by some viewers, crying, praying, and experiencing a deep sense of gratitude, opened up spaces for psychological healing, as many reflected on how they too were forgiven and loved by God. The film acted as a spiritual tool for processing one's own struggles, offering a visual representation of Jesus' empathy for human suffering. In this way, the psychological impact of the film also became an avenue for Christian believers to process their own emotional burdens, knowing that Jesus had borne the weight of all human suffering. Moreover, for some individuals, the Passion had a transformative effect on their psychological resilience. Watching Christ endure physical pain and emotional anguish, yet still choose to forgive, was seen as an inspiring example of strength in the face of suffering. This became a source of psychological empowerment for many who were dealing with their own personal struggles. In Christ's example, viewers found strength to confront their own suffering and to offer forgiveness, knowing that they were following in the footsteps of the one who had borne it all. The film's role in healing brokenness and inspiring compassion. The Passion also served as a reminder of the redemptive power of forgiveness, both in the spiritual and emotional sense. The portrayal of Jesus' forgiving words from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23 verse 34, struck a deep chord with many Christians. These words of forgiveness, uttered in the midst of the most severe pain imaginable, offered a profound psychological and emotional lesson on the power of grace. For those who struggled with anger, bitterness, or unresolved conflicts, the Passion provided a model for forgiveness, showing how Christ in his agony chose to forgive his persecutors. This act of radical forgiveness, often viewed as the pinnacle of Christ's character, resonated with viewers who sought to heal their own emotional wounds. Many Christians found themselves moved to reconcile broken relationships, forgive those who had wronged them, or seek forgiveness from others as a direct result of the film's emotional message of mercy and grace. Additionally, the psychological impact of the film was linked to a broader sense of compassion. For many Christians, the emotional weight of Christ's sacrifice led to a heightened sense of empathy for others who were suffering. The awareness of Jesus' sacrifice prompted believers to take action in their communities, to care for the poor and the oppressed, and to seek justice for the marginalized. By identifying with Christ's suffering, Christians were inspired to live out the call to love their neighbors and care for those in need. The lasting emotional and psychological legacy. In the years following its release, the emotional and psychological impact of the Passion of the Christ continued to be felt by many viewers. For some, the film sparked an ongoing journey of spiritual growth and healing. The film became a touchstone for reflection during the Lenten season, and it encouraged ongoing discussions in Christian communities about the nature of suffering, sacrifice, and redemption. For others, the emotional and psychological effects of the film were more transient, but the image of Christ's suffering remained etched in their minds as a powerful reminder of God's love and sacrifice. The film's impact on Christian devotion and emotional engagement with the story of Christ's Passion has been long-lasting, encouraging viewers to continually reflect on the profound spiritual and psychological lessons it conveys. The Passion of the Christ was undeniably a deeply emotional and psychologically impactful film, particularly within the context of Christianity. Its unflinching portrayal of Christ's suffering invited Christians to engage emotionally with the central event of their faith in a way that was unprecedented and deeply personal. For many viewers, the film acted as a catalyst for spiritual reflection, renewal, and healing, while for others, the graphic violence and emotional intensity created psychological distress that required careful processing. Regardless of these complexities, the film's lasting influence on Christian spirituality. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, 2004, is a visually striking and emotionally charged portrayal of the final 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life, depicting his suffering, crucifixion, and death in graphic detail. The film made waves upon its release, drawing massive attention for its raw and realistic depiction of Christ's passion. For many Christians, it was a powerful experience that brought them closer to understanding the immense sacrifice that Jesus made for humanity's salvation. However, as with any attempt to translate biblical events into cinematic form, the film also generated controversy, particularly regarding its theological accuracy. This review will examine the elements of the film that were faithful to Christian theology and Scripture, as well as those aspects that were fictionalized or depicted with creative liberties. By comparing the portrayal of events in the film with the biblical accounts, we will explore what was real and what was fictionalized, and how this impacts the theological significance of the film. A faithful representation of the core events, crucifixion and suffering. The Passion of the Christ was lauded for its intense and graphic depiction of the suffering and crucifixion of Jesus, and for the most part, it stayed true to the biblical narrative of these key events. The Gospel accounts from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John provide a foundational understanding of Christ's crucifixion and suffering, which Gibson faithfully portrayed in many respects. For example, the depiction of the Roman scourging, flagellation, is rooted in the Gospel accounts of Jesus being whipped and beaten before his crucifixion, Matthew 27 verse 26, Mark 15 verse 15, John 19 verse 1. The physical violence, particularly the flogging scenes, is depicted with brutal realism in the film, which some viewers found harrowing but also thought-provoking, as it illustrated the depths of Jesus' sacrifice. The film also correctly portrayed Jesus' ultimate execution on a cross, an excruciating form of Roman capital punishment that is central to the Christian faith. The Gospels describe Jesus being nailed to the cross, Luke 23 verse 33, John 19 verse 18, and Gibson's film closely follows this imagery, even showing the detailed process of crucifixion. The depiction of Jesus' final words from the cross, including, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23 verse 34, and "it is finished," John 19 verse 30, is accurate to the biblical texts, as these phrases are present in the Gospel accounts of Christ's crucifixion. Theological significance. These core elements of the film, Jesus' suffering, crucifixion, and death, are foundational to Christian theology, as they represent Christ's atoning sacrifice for the sins of humanity. Theologically, the portrayal in the Passion emphasizes the depth of Christ's pain and the physical cost of the redemption of the world. In this way, the film successfully brings to life the theological concept of substitutionary atonement, where Christ, through his suffering and death, pays the price for the sins of humanity, which is central to Christian salvation doctrine. Mary's role, artistic liberty and emotional resonance. While the film stayed largely faithful to the biblical narrative in terms of the key events of Christ's Passion, one of the more significant creative liberties in the Passion of the Christ revolves around the role of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Gospels do not provide extensive details about Mary's emotional state or her role during the Passion narrative, but Gibson chose to heavily focus on her presence throughout the film, including her emotional reactions to Jesus' suffering and death. For example, there is a highly emotional scene where Mary is depicted running to Jesus as he falls while carrying the cross, a moment that is not explicitly described in the Bible but is meant to convey Mary's sorrow and maternal connection to her son. The film also imagines Mary recalling moments from Jesus' childhood in a flashback sequence as she watches him being crucified. Theological significance. While this emotional portrayal of Mary resonates deeply with many viewers, it is important to note that the Bible does not provide these specific details. Mary's emotional state and her presence at Jesus' crucifixion are mentioned, but the intense flashbacks and additional scenes showing Mary's inner thoughts are artistic inventions. From a theological perspective, the film elevates Mary's role as the compassionate mother witnessing the suffering of her son, though such portrayals should be understood as artistic imagination rather than biblical fact. Nonetheless, many viewers found that these scenes helped highlight the emotional depth of the sacrifice, not just from Jesus' perspective but from Mary's as well, underscoring the theme of profound love and suffering. The depiction of Satan and supernatural elements. Another area where the Passion of the Christ takes creative liberties is in its portrayal of Satan and supernatural elements. In the film, Satan is depicted as a shadowy, almost androgynous figure, shown in scenes that are not explicitly described in the Gospels. One notable moment is when Satan appears in the Garden of Gethsemane, whispering to Jesus as he prays in agony, tempting him to abandon his mission. Additionally, Satan is shown walking alongside a demonic child, symbolizing evil's role in the narrative. While the Bible does describe Satan's influence on the Passion narrative, particularly in terms of Judas' betrayal, Luke 22 verses 3-6, and the temptation in the Garden of Gethsemane, Matthew 26 verse 41, Luke 22 verse 46. The personification of Satan in the film is an artistic choice that was not found in the Gospel accounts. Satan's active visual presence throughout the film is a creative addition to enhance the theological idea of spiritual warfare and the battle between good and evil, a theme that is certainly present in Christian theology but not depicted in the manner Gibson chose. Theological significance. The presence of Satan in the film reflects the Christian understanding of spiritual warfare, the idea that evil forces are actively working against God's redemptive plan. However, the Bible does not give such explicit visual representation of Satan during the Passion, and this artistic choice should be viewed through the lens of symbolic meaning rather than strict theological accuracy. In this case, the film seeks to emphasize the cosmic struggle between light and darkness, offering a cinematic representation of the unseen forces at work behind the scenes of Christ's suffering and crucifixion. The violence and its theological implications. One of the most widely debated aspects of the Passion of the Christ is its depiction of violence. The film's graphic and unflinching portrayal of Jesus' physical suffering, including the brutal flogging, the crown of thorns, and the scourging, was a major departure from traditional biblical portrayals of the Passion. Some critics argue that the film's excessive focus on violence obscured the deeper theological message of Christ's death, his ultimate victory over sin and death through the resurrection. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, 2004, is a film that had a profound impact on both secular and Christian audiences alike. It tells the story of the last 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life, focusing intensely on his physical suffering, his passion, crucifixion, and death. The film's portrayal of Christ's sacrifice was one of graphic intensity, visually illustrating the violence and emotional anguish he endured for the redemption of humanity. For many Christians, the movie was more than just a cinematic event. It was a catalyst for spiritual awakening and revitalization of faith. While the film certainly sparked controversy due to its graphic depiction of violence and the liberties taken with certain aspects of the biblical narrative, it also had a deeply transformative effect on viewers. The Passion invited Christians to re-engage with the central tenets of their faith, offering a poignant and emotional reminder of Christ's suffering and love. This review will explore how the film served as a spiritual awakening and revitalization of faith for many Christians, its impact on personal devotion, its ability to strengthen believers' connection to Christ's sacrifice, and the ways in which it led to a deeper reflection on the nature of salvation and Christian life. A powerful reminder of Christ's sacrifice. For Christians, the Passion of the Christ became a powerful reminder of the profound nature of Christ's sacrifice for the salvation of humanity. The portrayal of Jesus' suffering, his flogging, his crown of thorns, the mocking, and his crucifixion allowed viewers to witness firsthand the intense physical and emotional pain that Jesus endured. While Christians are taught about the suffering of Christ through the Bible, the film's graphic depiction made his sacrifice feel real and immediate in a way that was new to many. This depiction of Christ's suffering was both shocking and emotionally stirring, leaving a lasting impact on the audience. The film's stark portrayal of the brutality Christ faced brought to life the central event in Christianity, Christ's atonement for human sin through his suffering and death. Christians believe that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, died on the cross to reconcile humanity to God, paying the penalty for sin that humans could not pay themselves. While this is a central tenet of Christian theology, the Passion made the reality of this sacrifice visceral. Many viewers experienced a renewed appreciation of the weight of Christ's love, offering them a deep, personal connection to the central narrative of their faith. For those who may have become complacent or disconnected from their faith, this film served as an emotional jolt, reminding them of the immense cost of salvation and the boundless love of Jesus. A deepened understanding of the cross and the meaning of salvation. One of the ways the Passion of the Christ revitalized faith for many was by helping Christians gain a deeper understanding of the cross. Theologically, the cross is central to Christian doctrine. Jesus' crucifixion is seen not only as a tragic death but as the moment where humanity's sins were forgiven through Christ's sacrifice. The cross represents both the brutal reality of sin and the glorious truth of redemption. For many viewers, the film opened their eyes to the immense suffering Christ endured in order to fulfill his purpose. By showing the excruciating pain Jesus experienced during his flogging and crucifixion, the Passion emphasized the lengths to which Jesus went to take on the sins of the world. This film, in its vivid depiction, helped Christians better comprehend the magnitude of Christ's sacrifice, stirring a renewed sense of gratitude for the forgiveness that Jesus offers. The film also prompted deep theological reflection on the nature of salvation. For many, the brutality of the film's portrayal forced them to consider the gravity of sin in their own lives. It encouraged a personal examination of one's own faith journey, the extent of God's grace, and the understanding that salvation came at a tremendous cost. The process of watching the film led many to reassess their commitment to living out the Christian faith with sincerity and devotion, knowing that such a great price had been paid for their redemption. A call to a deeper, more authentic faith. Beyond just the emotional impact, the Passion of the Christ called for a deeper, more authentic expression of faith. For many Christians, the film served as a wake-up call to live more fully in the shadow of Christ's sacrifice. The violent, intense scenes of the film led to an outpouring of reflection on the gravity of Christ's call to follow him. The film reinforced the message that Christianity is not just about words or rituals. It is about a deep, personal commitment to the Savior who gave everything for the sake of humanity. For some, the film challenged them to rethink their priorities and reconsider their commitment to living out the commands of Christ in their daily lives. Seeing Jesus suffer and endure such violence made many viewers reflect on their own lives, contemplating whether they were living as true disciples of Christ. In this sense, the Passion became not just a cinematic experience but a spiritual catalyst for reawakening a desire to follow Christ with greater devotion and authenticity. Furthermore, for many Christians, the movie reignited a passion for prayer, worship, and scripture reading. After watching the suffering of Christ portrayed so vividly, many felt compelled to turn to God in prayer, offering thanks for the gift of salvation and seeking a renewed relationship with Him. For others, it reignited a commitment to study the Bible, particularly the Gospels, and engage more deeply with the story of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. Revitalization of Lenten practices and reflection on Christ's suffering. One of the most significant ways in which the Passion of the Christ sparked a revitalization of faith was by influencing Christians to observe the Lenten season with a renewed sense of reverence and intentionality. Lent is traditionally a time of reflection, fasting, prayer, and penance in anticipation of the resurrection of Jesus at Easter. The film, particularly with its focus on Christ's suffering during the final hours of his life, provided a vivid context for reflection during this sacred season. Many Christians who viewed the film in the weeks leading up to Easter found that it deepened their Lenten observance, helping them to enter more fully into the sorrow of Christ's passion and the joy of his eventual resurrection. The film's portrayal of Christ's brutal suffering during Lent also prompted many to re-examine their understanding of sacrifice and humility. The Lenten season, which is a time when Christians are called to give up certain luxuries and practice self-denial, was made even more meaningful for those who had seen the film. The focus on Christ's self-sacrifice spurred Christians to reflect on the ways in which they could mirror that sacrifice in their own lives through acts of charity, service, and deeper devotion. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, 2004, is a cinematic work that has left a profound and lasting impact on the Christian world. The film's primary aim is to present the final 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life, focusing intensely on his suffering, crucifixion, and death. What sets this film apart is its raw, unflinching portrayal of Christ's sacrifice, using highly graphic visuals to convey the depth of pain Jesus endured for the salvation of humanity. Through its stark depictions, The Passion has functioned as a powerful visual meditation on Christ's sacrifice, offering viewers not only an emotional experience but also an opportunity to contemplate the spiritual significance of Christ's atonement in a new, vivid light. In Christian theology, the suffering and death of Jesus are central to the faith. The cross represents the ultimate symbol of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Christ's death on the cross is considered the fulfillment of God's plan to reconcile humanity with himself by paying the penalty for sin that humans could not pay. As such, the narrative of Christ's passion is not merely an event from history but the foundation of the Christian faith. The Passion of the Christ provides a visual and emotional experience that invites the viewer to meditate on the profound theological implications of Jesus' sacrifice. This review will explore how the film serves as a powerful visual meditation on Christ's sacrifice, its impact on Christian faith, and the way it encourages deeper reflection on the meaning of atonement and redemption. The unflinching portrayal of suffering. One of the most striking elements of the Passion of the Christ is its depiction of violence and suffering, which stands in sharp contrast to traditional, more restrained portrayals of Christ's passion. While the Gospels briefly describe Jesus' suffering and the violence he endured, such as his flogging, the crown of thorns, and the crucifixion, the film takes these details to an extreme, emphasizing the physical brutality and emotional anguish in ways that no other film or artistic work had before. The flogging scene, in which Jesus is brutally whipped and beaten, is depicted with startling intensity, with the camera lingering on every painful strike, forcing the audience to witness the rawness of Christ's suffering. Similarly, the crowning of thorns is shown in excruciating detail, with blood dripping down Jesus' face as Roman soldiers mock him. These graphic portrayals serve as a form of visual meditation, inviting viewers to reflect deeply on the price that was paid for humanity's redemption. The violence is not gratuitous or sensationalized for shock value but is meant to be a stark reminder of the suffering Christ experienced on behalf of sinners. The film's brutality forces the audience to confront the truth that salvation came at an incredible cost, not just spiritually but physically. For Christians, this serves as a potent meditation on the immense love of Christ, who endured such pain and humiliation willingly. This visual depiction highlights the theological concept of substitutionary atonement, where Christ took upon himself the penalty for sin, suffering in the place of humanity. The personal nature of Christ's sacrifice. One of the most powerful aspects of the film is its ability to convey the personal nature of Christ's sacrifice. While many Christians are familiar with the theological idea that Jesus died for the sins of the world, the Passion of the Christ brings this abstract concept into personal focus. The film depicts Jesus' suffering not only as a historical event but as a deeply personal and intimate act of love for each individual. For example, during the scene of the flagellation, Jesus' gaze often meets the camera, almost as though he is looking directly at the viewer. This direct eye contact serves to emphasize that Jesus is not just suffering for an abstract group of people or for humanity in general, but for each person individually. In this way, the film creates a personal connection between the viewer and the events on screen, inviting viewers to reflect on Christ's sacrifice as something that was made specifically for them. This personal connection to the Passion can be spiritually transformative for Christians, reminding them that Christ's suffering was not just a historical event but an act of ultimate love meant for their salvation. Additionally, the portrayal of Mary, the mother of Jesus, plays an important role in emphasizing the personal cost of Christ's death. Throughout the film, Mary is depicted as an emotional witness to her son's suffering, reflecting a mother's love for her child in the midst of unimaginable pain. For many viewers, seeing Mary's agony as she watches Jesus endure such brutality amplifies the personal nature of the sacrifice. The pain and sorrow that Mary experiences serve as a parallel to the grief and anguish that believers may feel as they contemplate the weight of Christ's sacrifice. The symbolism of the cross. The cross has long been the most significant symbol in Christianity, representing the ultimate sacrifice that Christ made to atone for the sins of humanity. In the Passion of the Christ, the cross becomes a central and unrelenting symbol of Jesus' sacrifice. The film's final scenes, in which Jesus is nailed to the cross, focus heavily on the agonizing process of crucifixion. The graphic depiction of Jesus' hands and feet being nailed to the wood underscores the physical reality of Christ's suffering. Yet, in the midst of this pain, the film also emphasizes the theological significance of the cross, which is central to the Christian faith. For Christians, the cross represents the place where sin and death were defeated, where humanity was reconciled to God through the sacrificial death of Christ. In the Passion, the cross becomes the focal point of Christ's mission and the culmination of God's plan of redemption. The film's unflinching portrayal of the crucifixion invites viewers to meditate on the cross as the ultimate expression of God's love, justice, and mercy. It serves as a visual meditation on how the innocent Christ took upon himself the sins of the world, offering his life as a ransom for many, Mark 10 verse 45. The cross, both in its brutality and its redemptive power, becomes the enduring symbol of Christian hope. While the film shows the terrible cost of Christ's death, it also underscores the truth that the cross is not the end of the story. The resurrection, though not depicted in the film, is implied in the final scenes as the ultimate hope for Christians. Jesus' death on the cross, as portrayed in the Passion, is not a defeat but the pathway to victory over sin and death. This duality of suffering and hope is at the heart of Christian theology and is poignantly represented in the film. The role of Mary and the emotional impact of the Passion. Another powerful element in the Passion of the Christ is the portrayal of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Bible does not provide extensive details about Mary's emotional state during the events of the Passion, but the film imagines her reactions, particularly as she witnesses Jesus' suffering.